We already know a few of the superstars that have advanced in the 2024 edition of the WWE King of the Ring. We'll find out more, of course, as we go into SmackDown, and you have some of these matches that'll take place at live events this weekend. But I thought it would be fun to make some predictions from here on out. Of course, like I said, we've already had 3 people on the Raw side that have advanced. Gunther's advanced, Jey Uso's advanced, and so has Ilya Dragunov. But we know that now that we have an idea of what the SmackDown side of the bracket looks like, we can make some predictions all the way to the finish in Saudi Arabia and find out who's going to meet from Raw, who's going to meet from SmackDown, and who will be the King of the Ring. So let me first show you a look at my picks for the first round matches. Like I said, we know 3 people have already advanced, but here are my picks for the rest of the matches, and I will go through them and tell you why I am picking these to take place. Now, before I do that, let me say this up front. I think there are like 2 versions of how this thing can play out, and I'm going to give you version 2 of the bracket at the very end. For now, though, this will be my official pick, but I'm going to give you version 2 because here's what's going to happen. The SmackDown side of this bracket is what's going to cause the most chaos. I don't know that I've seen WWE put together an 8-man lineup on the SmackDown side, or really in any King of the Ring they've done in a long time, that maybe has the unpredictability of how the matches could play out on SmackDown. I think Triple H did a fantastic job making this hard to pick because usually you look at these matches, I feel like during the Vince era and such, you could say, all right, that guy's clearly advancing, that guy's clearly advancing. Now, there have been some other King of the Rings where things have gone kind of, off the rails a little bit, and you've had some surprise winners and all that in the first couple rounds. But with this one, you have a lot of top-tier talent facing each other, and so that makes it hard to pick exactly what route they could go because there's multiple combinations to work with here. All right, I'm just stalling as much as I can because I can't figure out which one I want to make my official bracket. But we're going to start with this one and go, here are my first round picks for the bracket here. Now, I'll make these a little bit as big as I can here, but you kind of see them up on the screen. So Gunther's advance, as we know, Kofi Kingston versus Rey Mysterio is going to take place on a live event. I decided to go with Rey Mysterio on this one. I think that's probably, a lot of people I know are picking Kofi. We just saw Gunther and Kofi not long ago. We know that we've kind of seen that feud play out for quite a while between Imperium and New Day. We saw all that. I feel like they've kind of done their thing there now, though. There's no really reason to maybe go back to that match just yet since we just saw it. We haven't seen Gunther versus Rey Mysterio. I think it was October 2022, so it's been a while since we've seen that match. That is something new, so I'm going to go with Rey to win that one. And again, we know that Dragunov and Jey Uso have advanced, so therefore, they're already set. Those are my 4 on the Raw side. Now, here's where things get interesting because, like I said, the SmackDown side of this bracket, I think there are so many chaos scenarios here where you could see so many different combinations play out in this thing. But here's the combination I'm going to go with, and it may be a little surprising, and I'll show you why later in the King of the Ring 2 bracket, which I'm going to say is kind of the alternative version that I could see WWE going with. Everything would sort of be changed here, except for maybe a couple picks. I went with AJ Styles to defeat Randy Orton. I went with Carmelo Hayes to defeat Baron Corbin. I think that's probably one of your biggest locks of the first round. I don't see Melo losing, and I'll explain why in a minute, why I think Melo's kind of the ultimate underdog maybe pick here to get to the final. But I'll talk about that in just a second with the setup. But LA Knight to beat Escobar, I think that's also kind of a given here. I feel like that just makes a lot of sense. You want LA Knight to advance, give him some momentum here moving forward. And then, yes, I picked Bobby Lashley to defeat Tama Tonga. Now, that's going to be maybe the biggest surprise. But let me tell you why I went with this version of these picks. It is with the thinking that in some way, shape, or form, you're going to get Randy Orton's match against AJ Styles and Bobby Lashley's match against Tama Tonga. Somehow there's going to be interference in both of those matches where maybe it is the bloodline that is not yet finished with Randy Orton. Maybe they cost him an opportunity against Styles, whether directly, inadvertently, however you want to do it, right? And then maybe there's an opportunity for kind of the payback from either Orton or Owens, whoever, to do the same for Tama Tonga in that match against Lashley. So, I don't know that this is a popular choice, and I don't feel confident about this at all. But if this is the scenario, like I said, I could see this being, if they want to get Orton and Tama Tonga out of there early, this is how you do it. You do with some interference and all of that, and I could see that leading to the second round matchups of an AJ Styles versus Carmelo, LA Knight versus Bobby Lashley. You could do that versus having. Here's the thing. I feel like if Orton and Tama Tonga, they either both lose in the first round or they both advance very far, which I'll show you what I mean by that when we get to the other version of the bracket here in just a few minutes. But for now, I'm going to go with this one. And I'm going to tell you why I'm going with this one. Because as we go into my picks for the semifinals, this should not surprise you at all of the picks I'm going to go with for the semis. Gunther advancing over Rey Mysterio, Ilya Dragunov advancing over Jey Uso. You know I've already done kind of a YouTube short saying, hey, I feel like WWE is cooking up that Gunther versus Dragunov match. I know people are like, hey, save that for a PLE, all of this. But I think we're seeing right now the kind of matches that they're putting on Raw in this tournament, the kind of matches they're going to be putting on SmackDown in this tournament, they want big matches. Triple H wants this to feel like the King of the Ring again. Like everything is important. And if you're going to do that, what other better final could you have than Gunther versus Dragunov on the Raw side with the winner heading to the final? I know that there's also that possibility, and I haven't really, kind of given this much thought because I don't think they're going to do it. I've seen people predict Jey versus Tama Tonga in the final here. I don't think you need the King of the Ring to do that. You don't need the King of the Ring to further the storyline, although you could say in a way, maybe you do need it because they're on different brands, right? I can understand that argument to say that, all right, it has to be Jey versus Tama Tonga because that's the only way you're going to get these two in the ring, and then what happens with the bloodline from there, right? But I just don't know how you get Gunther out of this tournament. And I'll, again, without trying to spoil everything, I just feel like Gunther's path is about as good as it gets at this point. So, because of that, I'm going to take Gunther versus Dragunov in one semifinal. In the other semifinal, yes, this is rivalry semifinal time because the two rivals on the Raw side, the two rivals on the SmackDown side. Part 3, the trilogy, who wins? Like, this is it. AJ Styles, LA Knight, the final match. I mean, probably not ever, but you know what I mean? Kind of in this sort of series that these guys have been having. And so, I think that could be the way this thing can unfold. But like I said a minute ago, I think Carmelo's the one that I'm not exactly sure that I want to just easily put out in the second round of this thing. Because I think Carmelo's an interesting idea to push him even all the way to the final potentially. But like I said, a lot of that's going to depend on who advances in some of these. And I think that's where legitimately I feel like I could get 3 of the 4 wrong on the SmackDown side. I do think Carmelo's advancing. But even like LA Knight losing to Escobar, some kind of interference scenario, that's always possible. I don't think I would do that. I think LA Knight needs a little momentum here. But I'm just saying, I think that's something where you go with this, you give me Styles Knight, part 3, and who wins? Who meets in the final? I've got Gunther and LA Knight in the final in Saudi Arabia. Now, that gives LA Knight his win over AJ, right? They've split the series to this point. Knight gets the big win to go to the final to meet Gunther. And like I said, I think Gunther going to the final here and Gunther winning this tournament, we could get the big upset. We could get the big surprise. But you know my thinking at this point if you've watched the other videos. I think Gunther needs to win this because I think this gives you an opportunity to put Gunther in a situation where he can challenge Cody Rhodes for the undisputed title and use the King of the Ring win as a means to do that despite being on different brands. And so I think that's how you can accomplish something very significant there while keeping the brand split in place. But I don't know. Like, to me, it's like I don't know who else I would pick to win this thing if it's not Gunther. Unless, like I mentioned, they go the route of doing a Jey versus Tama Tonga, which I just do not think is going to happen. Sure, it's always possible. It's WWE. It's pro wrestling. Anything can happen. But this is a King of the Ring tournament, and I think when you see the way they've done the matches so far, Triple H really wants to focus on getting the best matches. And I think in this semifinal scenario, Gunther, Dragunov, Styles, LA Knight, you're getting some great stuff. Now, people could argue, of course, do you think Gunther versus LA Knight's the biggest match that you could have, or is it someone else? Because I'm going to now give you what I think is sort of the alternative version of how this thing could play out. And like I said, I'll stick with this bracket as the official prediction. So that means I'm probably going to get all of these wrong. This is probably the next one that's going to make, since I'm not making my official prediction, this will probably be the one that's actually right. But let me show you this one. Because if we want to say that they are going to take this Orton Owens bloodline thing even further and use the King of the Ring as a vehicle to keep pushing that, to get back to what you need to get to, right? Which I think they can do this match without it. You see what I have in the final on the SmackDown side, Randy Orton versus Tama Tonga. You can do that match without the King of the Ring. And I think that's where the interference potentially in those first round matches could be the one where, hey, it's like the big surprise. All of a sudden you think you've predicted, hey, of course Orton's going to advance. Of course Tama Tonga's going to advance. And then, whoa, wait a second. It's actually Styles. It's actually Bobby Lashley. Now we've got to figure out who wins this thing, right? Maybe feels a little bit more unpredictable. But in this scenario, the only thing that changes is Orton beating Styles, Tama Tonga beating Bobby Lashley, and then those two, the ones advance to that. So that keeps LA Knight out of it, and that's where you could have the bloodline, I suppose, interfere, and cost LA Knight, and then maybe you have a little bit of something for LA Knight to sink his teeth into after King of the Ring, where now he's involved with the bloodline somehow. I mean, he's another top babyface. They've got to find people to work with. But this also, again, gets you back to Orton and Tama Tonga. And then maybe this is where somehow Kevin Owens gets involved. And Orton beats Tama Tonga, or Orton just beats him clean, right? You get to the final, Gunther versus Randy Orton. Maybe that's where you get a Jacob Fatu debut. You could have stuff like that. There's a lot of possibilities, right? And so this would be the alternative bracket that I would go with Orton advancing to the final, because, I mean, Gunther versus Orton has kind of been a dream match for people, I know, and I've also seen people bring up, can Orton really, have these kind of matches the next several weeks and then go into a match with Gunther knowing that, look, Randy Orton's still got, probably some injury history and stuff with the back and everything. Do you want him kind of having this kind of grind of a tournament and all this? It's not as though they're having these matches back to back to back. But, still, it is something that I think is a fair question, but I could totally see Triple H leaning into this. Orton never won the King of the Ring. Putting him in a final against a Gunther, that's, to me, if you look at the entire bracket, that's the biggest match you could do, would be Gunther versus Randy Orton. And so for that reason, it is Saudi Arabia. It's a huge show. I could see this being the one that wins out. But I also don't want to discount the idea. Like I said, you can still get multiple things accomplished here if you go with this, but you can also do the same here. You can still do a Randy Orton bloodline match in some scenario if you want to do that in Saudi Arabia, and you can still get Gunther versus LA Knight, which, going from the Knight to the King, I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can play with there. So, like I mentioned, I'm not 100% confident about any of these picks, just to be completely transparent, but I do think this is one of the more unpredictable brackets, at least on the SmackDown side. As you saw, I'm not changing my thought on the Raw side. I don't think Jay makes it. Remember, Jay's a replacement for Drew McIntyre. Jay was never originally scheduled to be in this tournament. So I can see people saying maybe it should be Jay getting to the final against Tama Tonga, all this, but I just don't think so, because I don't think you're putting the replacement in to win the tournament. And so I don't think Tama Tonga is winning the tournament. So I think Gunther is my clear choice on the Raw side. On the SmackDown side, I could see AJ Styles. I could see Randy Orton. I could see Carmelo Hayes. I could see LA Knight. I don't really see Tama Tonga versus Gunther as your final match, but I could see any of those four: Styles, Orton, Hayes, Knight. I could see any of those four coming out of this, and that's why I think they've done a fantastic job on the SmackDown side of the bracket, because really, we'll know right away if my picks are going to be correct or if it's going to be, the alternative bracket that gets the win here. We'll know right away when we start to see who wins AJ Styles, Randy Orton. Maybe it's the Tama Tonga Lashley match that happens first. Those are all the things where it's like, all right, maybe we just overthought this. The favorite, in my opinion, probably the match that is the favorite to get to the final, is Gunther versus Randy Orton. I didn't pick that one, but I think that's the most likely final. But again, I think what is going to determine that, do they want to take Orton and Tama Tonga out of this thing quickly? And if they do, it's probably by interference, one costing the other, and so forth. If that's how they go, I think you're getting that AJ Styles LA Knight Part 3, and then I think you're probably getting Gunther versus LA Knight. Or, like I said, could be Gunther versus AJ Styles in the final. So you guys let me know what you think. Give me your predictions for all the matches. How do you see it playing out? Do you see anyone other than Gunther coming out on the Raw side? On the SmackDown side, like I said, AJ Styles, Randy Orton, Carmelo, LA Knight, Tama Tonga? Who's your pick on the SmackDown side? I think this is going to be a lot of fun to see how this played out. No way I'm getting all these correct, but that's the fun we have when we make our predictions here on these WWE things. So you guys let me know what you think in the comments. As always, love your feedback. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button on your way out. Who is winning the 2024 King of the Ring? Or maybe more importantly, because it seems like there's a heavy favorite for the winner, who is meeting in the final in Saudi Arabia?